I've talked about some different examples of the type of sergeants, the types of NCOs you'll see in the United States Army. Well, you've asked for it. You wanted to know about the different types of officers that you might see in the United States Army. So I got some together, not officers exactly, but lists of types of officers, I mean. I got a list of different types of officers, and let's talk about those. What's up, my friends? U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and we're here back again to talk about some different types of individuals in the Army. This time, talking about officers. Talked about NCOs already, the sergeants, and if you haven't seen that video, a little card probably pops up that you can conveniently go click on and then come back to this video if you want to, or go check it out later and rewind to this point, or it's probably in the description box down below or something. But we're going to talk about some different types of officers that I've seen in the Army. There is not quite as many as I had like with the NCO ones. I wasn't, I guess, as creative, but I got some different types of ones. These are ones I've seen, and if you have some that I didn't mention that you can think of, some types, that you've seen, drop those down in the comment section down below. So let's get into my little list of the types of officers that I have seen. First one is the Butterbar. That's a terminology we usually use for a brand new lieutenant. That's because it looks like they got a butter bar on the chest. They are a brand new lieutenant. They are that second lieutenant, so that rank is just the gold, lieutenant bar kind of a thing, and so it looks like a butter bar, and we call them butter bars. Those are brand new lieutenants, so there's, pretty new to it, maybe a little bit scared in some cases, depending on their personality and different things, but, you kind of almost cut them a little bit of slack, for certain things. They're college educated, so they should be a little bit better on par compared to certain other soldiers, but they are butter bars, so when they do make mistakes, you kind of like, he's a butter bar. He's still pretty new. They're still kind of trying to find their way, trying to find their real role. They're afraid of getting in trouble from higher level leadership, and they still haven't really discovered themselves as an officer just yet, so these are your butter bars. Then there's the West Point officer, and I'm not talking about like just every West Point officer, every officer that comes from West Point. There's just like the specific type of West Point officer that everybody thinks of when you mention that this officer came from West Point. If you don't know what West Point is, just real quick, it's the like elite officer academy college type of thing that only the elite officers can go to type of thing. And the reason why I put this in here as far as the specific, West Point officer, I'm talking about the ones that are like super arrogant. I came from West Point, and what I say is gold because I am higher educated than all of you peons kind of a thing. That's not how all West Point officers are. I've known some pretty cool officers. There were, ones that came out of West Point, but a lot of the stereotype that usually soldiers think of when they hear this officer went to West Point is usually, oh crap, this guy or this girl is super arrogant, thinks that they're badass, thinks that they are the best person in the whole entire world, and they know the answer to everything, and their leadership style is the best, and everything is just the best because they went to West Point. So that's usually your common kind of stereotype with the West Point officer. But that's not to say that that's the way it is with all West Point officers, just that's the stereotype with it. Then there's what I personally feel like is the best officer, and that's what I call the hybrid officer. The hybrid officer is that officer that used to be enlisted, and then at some point in their career went maybe green to gold, went and got out of the Army, went to college, and then came back as an officer, whatever. They know what it's like to be an enlisted soldier, and now they have gone into the dark side, as we might say, and become an officer. These ones are usually like the cool ones because they know what it was like. They have done the shitty details. They have had sergeants yelling at them. They have experienced the things that us enlisted soldiers have experienced. They know what it's like working with officers. They know what are the good and the bad officers, and they kind of know better a little bit, for the most part usually. And so they're usually the cooler ones, I feel like. They have that hybrid knowledge of what it was like being enlisted, plus they've gone to college, now they're in that officer realm, so they're usually a little bit more approachable, especially at the lower ranks, when they're first going into that kind of rank. They're a little bit more kind of open with you, a little bit cooler, a little bit more, on your level of understanding what you're going through and everything. And so it makes it a little easier to work for them, to work with them, to kind of, respect their knowledge and respect what they're doing. But in my opinion, I think that's the best officer. If you can get an officer that used to be enlisted and then became an officer, amazing, in my opinion. I don't think I've ever seen, an officer that's in that scenario that was crappy and horrible. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but for the most part, all the ones I've seen in that scenario were like awesome and amazing. Then I've got the I want to be an NCO officer. These are the officers that think they're an NCO. They think that they are a sergeant. They think they're on that same kind of level as a non-commissioned officer. And I mean, technically rank-wise, of course, they're above it. But is what I'm talking about specifically is they're trying to boss around the soldiers like a non-commissioned officer would. Usually for the most part, your NCOs do NCO jobs. They are the ones that are telling the soldiers what gets done. They're the ones, correcting soldiers when they're wrong. The officers are more of a behind the scenes paperwork kind of a thing, leadership kind of a thing to organize stuff, and they can put input in through like the platoon sergeant or whatever, through the squad leaders, but they're not supposed to usually be the person that's correcting a private when they're doing something wrong. They might do that, and that's usually what this ends up being, is that officer that, thinks they're a non-commissioned officer, and that's just not something that they're supposed to kind of get into. That's like stepping on the toes of the NCOs. But I've seen some officers that are like this. They think that they're an NCO. They're trying to act like they're a non-commissioned officer. They're maybe, their private's messing up and they're yelling at that private and telling them to do this and do that. They're trying to, want to have the soldiers do certain types of training with them type of thing, which is supposed to be the non-commissioned officers that are supposed to be the ones training soldiers. So this is that officer that, kind of acts like a non-commissioned officer, kind of stepping over some people's toes and not letting the NCOs do their jobs. Kind of annoying usually to me. I have only had maybe like one or two that were kind of like that, but when you do have that, it's kind of annoying because it's not letting me do my job if I'm a non-commissioned officer or the other NCOs in that platoon or whatever, so that sucks. Then there's the bro officer, and this can be bad, but sometimes it's pretty cool too. I mean, this is like the officer that's like, he'll be buddy-buddy with everybody kind of a thing, and he's cool with all the Joes and all the soldiers, and, cracks jokes and has the fun with the soldiers, maybe plays pranks, just like the other people do, and does all the stuff as if they're just another Joe and they're your friend kind of a thing. And like I said, sometimes that can be good and sometimes that can be bad. I mean, on the bad side of it, it's really not something they should be doing kind of a thing. They're supposed to be a little bit more of a leader type of role, but I've had one officer that I remember that was like this, and they were pretty cool. I actually liked that kind of a mentality of an officer. Now, the things that this officer did, yeah, I mean, if other higher-ups knew that he was doing this, he would get in trouble, but this particular officer was actually in another platoon, wasn't even my platoon, and after hours, me, being an NCO at that time, and even some other lower enlisted soldiers would sometimes hang out at this officer's place where they lived. This officer was single, so lived on post, had on-post housing. He'd invite us over, have some drinks, we'd hang out, party, and all that kind of stuff. I remember he even had a stripper pole in his house, and sometimes some of the females that were there hanging out with us would jump on it. They wouldn't get crazy, like taking their clothes off. I'm not talking about at that level, just having fun. So, but it was still kind of fun and entertaining, and us guys would have fun and try to see if we can do some fancy moves on the stripper pole. But nonetheless, it was cool that he had a stripper pole in his house. I actually do, thinking of that kind of topic, I do remember there was one time that me and some friends actually did go to a strip club with this officer. So yeah, I mean, that stuff is not allowed. Officers aren't supposed to do that kind of a thing. But you know what? I liked the guy. He was cool, and I enjoyed it. But technically, based on Army rules, we're not supposed to be doing those kinds of things. But sometimes you end up with that situation if you have the bro type of officer, and he's just one of the guys, or maybe one of the girls in that case too. I don't think I've ever seen a female like that, but I've seen one or two guys like that for officers, and it's fun. It's good times. Next, I got the tries too hard officer. This is the officer that sometimes in this kind of category tries really hard, but doesn't necessarily get it right? Maybe they're trying really hard to get it right, but they don't, but they got a good gung-ho attitude, and that's cool, but it's like they still need some work, right? Maybe they're still kind of new, and they got a lot of pressure from the company commander to have high expectations for that officer, being a platoon leader, being whatever kind of a thing, and they just try really hard. I've even kind of seen it with maybe newish company commanders where they try really hard, but they just don't quite have it. So I kind of put it in that category of this officer that tries too hard, right? They're trying too hard and it's just not working. Maybe if they would, focus more on the task before they give the effort to plan it out better, or whatever the case might be type of thing, then maybe it would be more successful. But this individual just tries really hard and sometimes just falls short. One last one that I'll do for this video isn't necessarily a category, but it kind of is a category. I'm making it, I guess, a category kind of a thing because it's different than the other officers, and that is the chaplain officer. So that is a specific officer, right? That's not really like a made-up thing. There's chaplains in the Army, and I kind of want to segregate them from the other officers because chaplains are completely different than a lot of officers that you'll see in the Army. Chaplains are very approachable most often. I've heard some stories of some pretty crazy chaplains, but I've never seen that. I've always encountered like awesome chaplains where they're super nice, super approachable. They come around, they want to talk to the soldiers, they want to see what's going on, they want to see how they're doing in life, how's their morale. I've known some officers that come around bringing candy, you know, and they're like, oh, hey, you guys want this? You guys want that? I got this stuff. You guys want some of this, you know? And they're always really friendly, all the ones I've ever met. And that's different than just your regular platoon leader, company commander. You know, I feel like the chaplain in all the situations I've ever had is never an individual you fear. You're like, oh crap. You know, you might have that with like certain platoon leaders, company commanders, battalion commanders, all that kind of, you're like, oh crap, here comes Captain so-and-so, here comes Colonel so-and-so. But here comes Chaplain so-and-so isn't usually a thing of like, oh crap, we're worried about that. We're like, cool, hey, look, it's Chaplain so-and-so. You guy's awesome. I guess you could have female chaplains, but I don't think I've ever met a female chaplain. I think it's out there, but I've just never met one. But the chaplains are in their own kind of category because those are just always really cool individuals. They're always super approachable, they're always super nice, which is probably what they should do, right? They're a chaplain. You don't want to have a chaplain you don't trust, that you don't want to go to church services for, you don't want to confine your trust in them and talk to them about like something that's bothering you, like if a family member passed away or something else like that, because they're a dickhead, you know, or they're super mean or whatever. So they probably should be super approachable and super nice. So it's probably part of their job, really. I don't feel like people who are like on that kind of level of high level of anger or whatever, being, you know, really mean, probably want to be chaplains. So they probably don't end up being chaplains, but chaplains are on their kind of realm, and I think they're usually pretty cool. This list is a little bit smaller. If you have some experience with different types of officers that you kind of have named in a certain kind of category, drop that down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear about your experience with different officers and that kind of group of officers. If you missed it from the last video about the different types of NCOs, well, you actually check it out right here. So go watch this one here of my different types of NCOs. If you haven't seen it, check it out. If you haven't, go to browse the channel. There's probably something on there. Check out my links down in the description box down below. I'm Christopher Chaos. See you next time. See ya.